She smiled for the cameras. She showed up, delivered her lines, and represented something the world had never seen before. But behind that composed exterior, something else was happening. Something that powerful people in Hollywood preferred to keep quiet. Before her death, Nichelle Nichols finally broke her silence, and what she revealed about her time on the set of Star Trek changed everything fans thought they knew about one of television's most celebrated shows. This is the story they never told you. A symbol built on a shaky foundation. When Star Trek premiered in 1966, it presented itself as a bold vision of the future. A starship crew made up of people from different backgrounds, races, and planets, all working side by side in harmony. It was idealistic, it was progressive, and for millions of viewers, it felt like a promise. At the heart of that promise stood one woman, Nichelle Nichols, dressed in her red uniform, seated confidently at the communications console as Lieutenant Uhura. For Black Americans watching at home, especially young black girls, this was unlike anything they had ever seen. Uhura wasn't a maid. She wasn't a servant. She wasn't a background character defined by racial stereotypes. She was skilled, respected, and essential to the mission. Whoopi Goldberg, who later became a star in her own right, openly said that seeing Uhura on television made her realize, for the first time, that black women belonged in the future. Mae Jemison, who would go on to become the first black woman to travel to space, credited Nichols as a direct inspiration. The image was powerful, the symbol was real. But the experience behind that symbol, far more complicated than anyone was willing to admit. What was really happening on set? Here's what the promotional material never showed you. Nichols later confirmed what fans had suspected for years, that she often felt ignored, sidelined, and deliberately minimized behind the scenes. Her lines were regularly cut. Her character's role was frequently reduced to little more than a few words per episode. And, perhaps most tellingly, she was often left out of promotional photographs entirely, the kind of photos used to market the show to the public and build a cast's profile. Think about what that means. The same network that was happy to use her image as proof of their progressive values was simultaneously working to keep that image as small as possible. She was visible enough to make a statement, but never quite visible enough to threaten the established order of things. Nichols was too professional to make a public scene. She carried herself with the same dignity on set that Uhura carried on the bridge. But privately, the frustration was building, and it eventually reached a breaking point. The weekend that changed everything. After the first season wrapped, Nichols made a decision. She was done. Broadway had always been her first love. She was a trained singer and dancer who had performed with Duke Ellington and Lionel Hampton. She had done theater in Chicago and New York, and when an opportunity came to return to the stage, she took it as her sign to walk away from Star Trek for good. She went to Gene Roddenberry, the show's creator, and handed in her resignation. What happened next is one of the most quietly dramatic moments in television history. Roddenberry didn't argue. He didn't pressure her. He simply asked her to take the weekend before making her final decision. If she still felt the same way on Monday, he would respect it. That weekend, Nichols attended an NAACP banquet. She was told a fan wanted to meet her. She assumed it would be a typical Star Trek enthusiast. Instead, she turned around and found herself face to face with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wasn't just a fan. He was, by his own description, one of her biggest admirers. And what he told her that night didn't feel like flattery. It felt like a mission briefing. Dr. King explained that her role on Star Trek was not simply entertainment. It was representation in one of the most watched time slots on American television, during one of the most racially divided periods in modern American history. He told her that her presence on that bridge as a competent, respected, dignified black woman was doing something that speeches and protests alone could not do. It was reshaping what people believed was possible. He called her role a form of protest in itself. Nichols went back to Roddenberry's office on Monday morning and told him she was staying. When she shared Dr. King's words, Roddenberry reportedly became emotional. He had always believed in his diverse cast. He had gone to bat for Nichols when she was being marginalized. And now, armed with the weight of what Dr. King had said, she found a reason to endure what the industry kept throwing at her. The kiss that broke American television. If staying on the show was the decision that changed her trajectory, then what happened in 1968 was the moment that changed television history. In the episode, Plato's Stepchildren, Nichols and William Shatner, Lieutenant Uhura, and Captain Kirk shared a kiss. It was one of the first interracial kisses ever broadcast on American television, and NBC knew exactly how controversial it was going to be. The network was nervous. America was in the middle of a racial crisis. Civil rights battles were still being fought in the streets. And here was a major prime-time show about to put a black woman and a white man in an intimate moment together, broadcast directly into living rooms across the country. NBC pushed back. They requested reshoots versions of the scene without the kiss. And this is where the story gets particularly revealing. Shatner, according to Nichols, deliberately sabotaged every alternate take. He made faces. He looked in the wrong direction. He turned what should have been usable footage into unusable footage, over and over again, until the only version that could actually air was the original, the one with the kiss. The network had no choice but to run it. When the episode aired on November 22, 1968, something unexpected happened. The backlash NBC feared never really materialized in the way they anticipated. Instead, the show was flooded with positive letters. Viewers were moved. They felt they had witnessed something historic because they had. Nichols later spoke about a letter she received from a white Southern man who admitted he did not personally support interracial relationships, and yet, even he acknowledged the power of that moment. He couldn't dismiss it. The scene had gotten through to him in a way that surprised even himself. That's the kind of impact that can't be manufactured. It had to be lived. What the industry did after. Here's the part that often gets buried under the celebration. Despite the historic kiss, despite the cultural impact, despite the letters and the legacy and the little girls who grew up watching Uhura and daring to dream bigger, the industry didn't exactly throw its doors open for Nichols. She was offered a role on the show Mannix during Star Trek's final season. A new opportunity, a chance to expand. But Gene Roddenberry blocked it, holding her to her contract. The same man who had championed her, who had teared up when she told him Dr. King's words, also made a business decision that took a choice away from her. When Star Trek ended in 1969, Nichols found herself navigating smaller roles. A secretary here, a tough madam in a 1974 blaxploitation film there. Hollywood, as it so often does with black women who have broken barriers, wasn't exactly lining up to hand her the next great role. She kept working. She kept performing. She did voice acting, stage productions, television appearances, but the industry that had benefited so enormously from her groundbreaking work was not particularly generous in return. The mission that mattered most. What Nichols did next, however, was arguably more significant than anything she had done on screen. She partnered with NASA. In the years following Star Trek, Nichols became a recruiter for the space agency, working on a mission to bring women and minorities into the astronaut program at a time when that pipeline barely existed, and the results were extraordinary. Dr. Sally Ride, Colonel Guyon Bluford, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Charles Bolden, Frederick Gregory, Laurie Garver. These are names that belong to history, and Nichols played a direct role in bringing them to NASA's door. She didn't just play a character who believed in a better future, she went out and helped build one. In 2015, she even flew on a special NASA flight that observed Mars and Saturn from high altitude above Earth. Nichelle Nichols, the woman who had once been left out of promotional photographs, was flying toward the stars she had spent her life pointing to. The final chapter. Her later years were not easy. In June 2015, she suffered a minor stroke. By early 2018, it was confirmed that she had developed dementia, a heartbreaking development for a woman whose mind had always been one of her greatest strengths. Legal battles emerged around her care, her conservatorship, and who had the right to make decisions on her behalf. Her son, Kyle Johnson, eventually stepped in to look after her. Through all of it, those who knew her spoke of her warmth, her humor, her insistence on looking forward even when the past was heavy. Nichelle Nichols died on July 30, 2022, in Silver City, New Mexico. She was 89 years old. The cause was heart failure. NASA released a tribute acknowledging that her recruiting work had fundamentally changed the face of the space program. And in a final act that felt almost scripted, except that no one could have written it better, her ashes were sent into deep space. She had always been reaching for the stars. In the end, that's exactly where she went. What her story actually tells us. Here's the thing about Nichelle Nichols that gets lost when we only celebrate the highlights. She was not given her place in history. She earned it and then had to fight to hold on to it while the industry around her quietly tried to shrink her role, limit her lines, cut her from the photographs, and move her gently out of frame. She stayed because a man she admired told her that her presence mattered. She pushed back because a co-star was willing to ruin a dozen takes to make sure the right moment got on air. She built a legacy not just through the roles she played, but through the astronauts she recruited, the little girls she inspired, and the quiet, persistent refusal to disappear. That's the real story of Nichelle Nichols. Not just the woman in the red uniform, but the woman behind it who knew exactly what she was doing and did it anyway. If this story moved you, make sure you subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this one deserve to be told fully, honestly, and without leaving anything out.